through the steps. Thank you, America.
Hi, everybody. My name's America. I'm an alcoholic. Oh, my God. I am so excited to be here. I can't even express to words. It is such an honor and a privilege to be here. I want to thank Bob and Marnie, and my host, Karen, has outdone herself. And it's just starting, but I'm already having a blast. And so, all right. My sobriety date is July 15th, 1991. And I was told that I am to never plan what I share. Because if I do, that's about ego instead of trying to carry the message. So before I come up, I always pray and ask God to help me speak to the person who really needs to hear it the most tonight. And if anybody else gets something out of it, that's just icing on the cake. I will do my utmost to try not to swear. However, because I am not going to filter, I cannot guarantee what might fall out of my face. I'm going to be just as interested as you. So there's that. Okay. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous 3 weeks after my 19th birthday. And at that point in my life, I had spent half of my life in active addiction. I was drinking a gallon of vodka every 2.5 days, coming out of blackouts, driving other people's cars because my car had already been taken away from me. And that's the way that I drank. A lot of times people say, I wish I would have gotten here earlier in their life. And the bottom line is that we have no power over when God taps us on the shoulder and says, it's time. It's time to change your life. And for reasons that I will never understand, I got tapped on the shoulder early and I paid attention. I spend an astronomically small amount of time on my drunk log. You basically heard it. Bottom line is that if it worked, I would have been out there doing it. I blacked out 99% of the time that I drank. So I really don't know. I know that people didn't want to spend time with me anymore. I know that I was thrown out of the house. And had I not gotten a job as a live-in nanny/maid, I would have been homeless. And I grew up in San Diego, California. And my older sister is named Tiffany. My name really is America, by the way. People often wonder if that's really my name. It is. And it's a lot cooler name to have now than it was when I was in third grade. Everybody's like, wow, what a great name. I'm like, where were you when I needed the backup, you know? And my sister's name's Tiffany, and I was fortunate enough to have just the most wonderful relationship with my sister. She was my protector, and my parents are still married and still living. And I had my issues were with my dad. And if you've been around here long enough to know that if you have issues with your dad, you grow up and have daddy issues. And I brought that to Alcoholics Anonymous. So that was fun. And the steps help a lot. So does therapy. It talks about that in the book. There's lots of psychologists and psychiatrists that are available to help us. Also, there's lots of people of religion and medicine that can help us, you know. And all right. Here's what I know about alcoholism. This is a big book. Mine's just like, somebody gave this to me when I turned 90 days sober. It just has the Serenity Prayer on it. And it's a third edition. And I was told that this was the instruction manual for life. And the reason that I'm here, I've been sober since my first meeting, and that is not because I am special. That is because I am, as the book describes, I was beat into a state of reasonableness. And my ass was handed to me. I was out of good ideas. I wanted to die, but I didn't want to die. And magically, and also just to, put in perspective, I grew up in San Diego, so at the very end of my drinking, I was drinking with Navy guys because they were the only ones that could keep up with me. And and also never gave me a hard time about my drinking, which was really helpful because the book talks about that we experience the phenomenon of craving. And I am someone that absolutely, when I start drinking, I can't stop. My goal when I drink is to be completely and totally annihilated. I don't want to feel anything. More importantly, I don't want to hear what my head had to say. And this is an absolutely fatal condition. My sister Tiffany died of alcoholism. It's been 10 years, and she shot herself. And I don't know why I got it and she didn't, and it doesn't matter. It matters that I'm here and I get to carry the message, and I get to be of service to other people. The book tells us that we have a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. And if you look up the word reprieve, one of the definitions is a stay of execution. So we have a daily stay of execution that's hinged on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. And so I asked Karen to read that thing in the spiritual experience, because when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was completely and totally broken in the area of spirituality. I did not at that time understand the difference between religion and spirituality. I was brought up, not but so much by my mom, but my dad always said that religion was a crutch for weak people, and that's what I thought. And, a lot of times we get really scared that, your guys aren't doing it right in Alcoholics Anonymous. You're going to scare the newcomer out of the room. And the truth of the matter is that my experience is that people get exactly what they need when they come to Alcoholics Anonymous, when they have an honest desire to stop drinking. And that's really the key. The forward to the first edition talks about, this is before the traditions had been written, is that we have an honest desire to stop drinking, right? Now, if you're here, if you have a desire to stop drinking, I got to tell you, we're really glad you're here. Extremely glad you're here. And, but if you have an honest desire to stop drinking, not because you're going to lose a spouse or a job or have some sort of consequence or something like that, but if you're just, as I've heard here, if you're sick and tired of being sick and tired and you do the work, I guarantee you your life will transform. And, the miracle is that what I needed when I got here as a 19-year-old punk was some serious old-timers that cared what I did and not how I felt. And I don't know why, but I really, really struggled with sponsorship when I first got sober. I seemed to be able to talk any of my sponsors into a really bad idea. Now, I should say that I do come from a family of salespeople, and so I could sort of work that. But I would go and talk to an old-timer, this one old-timer in particular, a guy named Cactus Jack, and I would tell him, hey, I was thinking of doing fill in the blank, and he's like, what are you, effing stupid? I'm like, maybe. Maybe I won't do that. But the thing that I walked away with in my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous was that if you have an alcoholic horse thief and you take away the alcohol, you still have a horse thief. AA and the steps work on the horse thief. The reason that is important is because the spiritual experience, as it talks about, that it's a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. What is that? That's the triangle, right? That's meetings, service, and step work, right? And what I was taught was that if this is an equilateral triangle, so all sides are to be the same in how I work it in my life, but if I'm standing on the tippy top of this and I'm going to meetings and I have commitments, but I'm not working the steps, I'm going to fall. You pull one side of that thing, and this thing doesn't work. It's a recipe, and I don't need to figure it out. Fortunately, an old-timer told me that, you could be too smart for this program and maybe it's time to dumb it down. And ultimately, what my working definition of humility evolved into, I don't know, can you show me? And even if I don't think it's going to work, I'm going to try it anyway. And this program is not for people who want it. It's not for people who need it. It's for people who do it. And the good news is that if you're sitting there and your head is telling you, I'm lazy, I'm this, I'm that, I don't have very good follow through, I assure you there's not a person sitting in here that had a problem following through getting loaded. So all you have to do is take a skill set that you already have and redirect it, which is a lot easier than starting from scratch. And, the thing about abandoning your old ideas completely, well, let me do this. Let me put a pin in that, and let's see if I remember to come back to it. Can't guarantee that I will. Okay. The thing that I was brought into very early in the program was the doctor's opinion. I really thought that I drank because I liked to party. I really liked to party. And not that I remember any of it, which is really, weird. But anyway, but the point is that I really enjoyed doing it because I love checking out, right? And so when somebody said, no, you're actually bodily and mentally and spiritually sick, you're different. The book talks about the fact that we have an allergy. The mental side of how the mental component comes into the allergy for us is that unlike someone that has an anaphylactic peanut allergy, they don't go 5 years and go, I've never had a Reese's peanut butter cup. It's not really peanut butter, it's candy. I'm sure it won't get me sick. I'm sure it'll be fine. But we do that, right? The great obsession of every abnormal drinker, right? Drink like a gentleman, gentle person, whatever. By the way, if you're a young woman in this program, or you're just, a woman, just generally, especially if you're new to this program, I do want to say that you have to remember that the book was written, it's historical, okay? Because it was written, it was published in 1939, right? So we had a patriarchal society. It was he is written all over this book. We are convinced to a man, right? And the thing is that we can't get bent out of shape as women when you read that, because if you do, what that is your head trying to kill you. You have to just look for the message and realize that you're reading a historical text and pull out the lessons, and that's what we need to do. Read the black parts. By the way, if you hear anything I say tonight, only one thing, you need to find someone, if this has never happened in your life, find someone who's been through the steps and is very familiar with this book, and you sit down with them and you have them read it to you line by line. And then you look for the similarities. If you don't understand something, you look it up, and when you get to a step, you work it. And that's how we work the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Anything that I say that's outside of this book is just my opinion based on my experience, and my old timers taught me some really important things, like honoring my word. I had a coffee commitment, just to give you an idea what these guys were like. I had a coffee commitment, and I had to work, and I missed my commitment. And then the next week, I showed up for my coffee commitment. They're like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah." "Were you in the hospital?" I'm like, "No." They're like, "Miss your commitment again, and we'll put you there." And I knew that they weren't serious, but I wasn't 100% sure that they weren't serious. And then they taught me that the reason that we follow through is because when we get here, we have nothing. We're completely and totally bankrupt emotionally and spiritually. And so every time I say I'm going to do something and then I do it, it helps me feel just a little bit better. It helps me begin to build the integrity that I drank away. And then they said, and if you can't get your commitment covered, or you can't come get it covered. I mean, it's, Don't leave us hanging. And plus, I was a coffee maker. Jesus, don't show up for a coffee commitment. It's like, holy shit, AA is going to burn down. So, sorry. My bad. Anyway, the doctor's opinion. So, my love for drinking. So, men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. While they admit it is injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. So the following is the cycle of addiction. Okay? Here's where we start. We are restless, irritable, and discontented. Unless we can again experience a sense of ease and comfort, which comes at once by taking a few drinks they see others taking with impunity, after they have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving develops, we pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging always remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again, and that this is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope for his recovery. So what's the psychic change? It's the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. It's the triangle. That's it. I just don't have to alter the recipe. As special as I'd like to think I am, the truth is what I've learned is that we're more alike than we are unalike. And when I came here, I could share about my pain. I could share about, it's like we're a suitcase. And it's like I could that was full of stuff that doesn't fit, things that are out of style, things that are tattered, and I just got to offload it bit by bit so that I could make space for the things that work. And part of that involves abandoning my old ideas completely. So as far as, the first step, this involves conceding to your innermost self that you are an alcoholic. And so I'll tell you what that means to me. It means that every time I put alcohol into my system, I'm going to experience the phenomenon of craving. Every time. That's 100% of the time I'm going to have an anaphylactic reaction to peanuts, although I love peanuts, but you get what I'm saying. So that never changes. It's a medical condition that I can't offload. When I really surrender to that idea, what happens is that there's no circumstance that's ever going to make it warranted for me to take a drink. The other shift and the other part of the first step for me has to do with having to make a shift that God is always working for my highest good and that God will never give me more than I can handle. It might feel like it, but my evidence is that I've never burst into flames because I was having my feelings, nor have I ever seen anybody else have that happen. So that tells me I'm not going to cease to exist. When I had 30-something days of sobriety, I had this huge cry, don't know why, totally just let it out. And when I was done, I could not believe how much better I felt. I mean, it was shocking. And I thought to myself, I cannot believe that I've been putting that off for that long. And it was such a significant thing that I actually said out loud, note to self, when I feel my feelings, I feel better. Because I wanted to put a pin in that. What else did I put a pin in? There was something else. I don't remember. It'll come back to me, if it's important enough to say. So the way that I've heard the first, second, and third step basically described is I can't, he can, he being a higher power, it, he, she, they, whatever, and I think I'll let him, right? So the most important part about the doctor's opinion and in that cycle of addiction is what actually starts it, and that is that we're restless, irritable, and discontent. This is the way I walked through life. I was basically a raw, exposed nerve. Never felt okay in my own skin, vacillating between wanting to kill myself or you. You know what I mean? In any given moment. I had a small rage problem when I got here, and through a series of acting better than I felt, God will remove your character defects. but we have to do something about it, right? And so steps 4 through 9 are designed to offload all of the restless irritability and discontentment we carry from our past. The thing that makes us look over our shoulder, you know, when we thought we saw somebody, or like duck somebody if we saw somebody else. We get to clear all of that. You know, if you're concerned about your 4th step, let me tell you 2 things about it. Number 1, you've already done the hardest part. You lived it. Writing it down on a piece of paper is nothing compared to the shit fest that I had to go through getting my ass kicked. I mean, seriously, there was some serious trauma in my life, and I had to address that over and above the steps. And thank God that I did, because that anger, when I went through and I did my inventory, I got so much, I got an awful lot of forgiveness for the people who had harmed me and also for myself. But there was an awful lot of feelings that were still like kind of stuck in me. And so what would happen is that I would have these experiences, which would be, if it's like my reaction would be like not matching the situation. I describe this as, if it's hysterical, it's historical. So if it's not matching the situation, it means it's not about the situation. There's something else that needs to be handled. And that's a clue that I probably need to do some writing, probably need to talk to my sponsor or some other people in the program, and then figure out what actually is going on. And then it usually has to have some inventory work, because it's usually something that just is a very subtle, insidious thing. So, for example, like my inventory, there was 27 pages on my dad. And by the way, I have really a wonderful relationship with my dad. And when I had 90 days of sobriety, we went to breakfast. And when he dropped me off, he told me, "I'm not proud of you, and I'm ashamed to have you as a daughter." And now my dad calls me every day. And my dad and I have a wonderful relationship because of Alcoholics Anonymous. What I had to finally understand is, when I did my 5th step, what happened was that I went from being a victim to being a victor. The reason why it's such great news about seeing your part in something is that if you are sick and tired of it happening, you have some input as to whether that's going to happen again. The book tells us that the only thing that we can control is our attitude and our actions, right? And so when I can't control my actions, I remove myself. I've learned to understand what my internal cues are, which is usually like, I'm going to murder you, and in which case I have an agreement, like in my relationship. We have an agreement that if either one of us has to say, "I love you, but I need to step away," and then the rule is we stop talking mid-sentence so that we can go away. I've been in a relationship for 6.5 years. I've never cussed at him. I've never yelled at him. He accused me once of yelling at him. He's like, "Don't yell at me." I said, "Let me tell you something. If I was yelling at you, the neighbors would know." And I'm just no character assassination, and that's a gift of recovery. You know, learning how to just pause when agitated and ask for some direction. And what I learned, like internally, what was happening for me was that first I was like irritated, and I didn't acknowledge it, and I didn't address it. Then I was like frustrated, and I didn't acknowledge it, and I didn't address it. Then I was angry, and I didn't acknowledge it, and I didn't address it. And then I would just like blow a full-on head gasket and go into a full-on rage. And so I kept doing this again and again. I didn't know what to do. So like always, when in doubt, pray for some help. So I asked God to give me some awareness of when I might be actually irritated or frustrated. And that was like my cue to maybe step out. And, probably the 2 most important skills that we probably can gain here are delayed gratification is one of them, and I just forgot the other one. That's all right. It'll come back to me. I've actually been up since 1:15 this morning, so not by choice. It just happens sometimes. And what I know is that ultimately when that fifth step happened and I could see what my part was, because the book is real clear. My sponsees over time get real sick of me because I always kind of go back to like one thing. It's on page 62. I should also say before I get there that the thesis statement of the big book, just in case you're wondering, is on page 45. And it says that lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how were we to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. Very importantly, it doesn't say solve your alcoholism. It says your problem. And so the reason that that's significant is, getting back to why my sponsees love me, is because it tells us what our problem actually is. Who knew? Again, all the answers are here. Selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that sometime in the past we've made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. So the ultimate question is, when they're talking to me about, you're not going to believe what happened, and then they did this and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, what decision based on self placed you in a position to be hurt? Where was your selfishness? Where was your self-centeredness? What was your fear? And that's helpful because once I can acknowledge that I have those fears, I can turn them over to God. This fear that you're never, that like, I'm not going to get what I want or whatever it is. My experience is that rejection, which is not getting what I want, rejection is God's protection. And what I know is that I can only see what's right in front of me, whereas God has the aerial view. And so I might be hitting my head up against a wall saying, I need to get to the other side of this. I have to do it. But God looking over the top, you know what's on the other side? A cliff. God is helping me. God is saving me. And my job is, being in acceptance is just being in reality without judgment. It's just like, if you even knew, like, my internal monologue, what I say all the time for the things that are this big or the things that are this big is, okay, this is happening. Okay, that's happening. This is happening. When I can't open a bag of spinach, okay, this is happening. And then sometimes my spiritual fitness will be gauged on how much I start swearing at that point, and wanting to throw the bag against the wall. And so, but the other really great thing about the fifth step is that it was the first time that I had completely been washed over with unconditional love. Now, I'm sure that my family had that, but they couldn't get it to me in a way that I understood. And when I was sitting there telling my sponsor everything, she just would look at me and say, I understand. That happened to me. And you know what the old timers told me when I was, the old timers, God, such jackasses. When I was starting to get kind of edgy and I hadn't done that 4-step yet, got to a point that every time they'd see me, they'd be like, so how's that 4-step coming? How's that 4-step coming? How's that 4-step coming? For a second there, I actually thought that was my name. And I just got so tired of hearing it, and I finally just did it. And I can tell you that the old-timers saved my life in Alcoholics Anonymous, because it took me quite some time. I still did the steps, but I just never really connected with a sponsor. I have a wonderful sponsor now, and her message to me, no matter what is going on, is where is God in the situation and what's the best appropriate self-care? That's it. And, self-care, in terms of getting into the 6th and 7th step, I always laugh when people talk about their character defects, right? I'm working on my character defects. I'd advise you not to do that. What I've learned here is that if you focus on the problem gets bigger. If you focus on the solution gets bigger, right? I know this is true because otherwise the chapter in the book would be called There is a Problem. And so it's not. There is a solution. If you're newer to the program and don't know that, that's what it's called. So we don't focus on our character defects. We focus on our character assets, which are the opposite of what our character defects are. So, for example, me having to work on radical aggression. Why was I so aggressive? Because I knew no other way to take care of myself. That's the bottom line. It's the only personal safety protection mechanism that I had. And so that was great when I was out there, but it's really turned into a liability once I had to start living by spiritual principles. And that's a problem. And so so the opposite of being totally aggressive is being appropriately assertive. The other side of that, which is not my baggage, but certainly is that you have people that the way that they avoid conflict is by being super passive, and they have to learn also how to be appropriately assertive. It's the same, but it's just coming from different directions. And, the 6th and 7th step are my absolutely most favorite steps that exist because they are, in my estimation, the driver of, after I've gone through and done the steps, they're the driver of my of restless irritability and discontentment for me. When I behave poorly, I feel poorly. And I have had to learn how to act better than I feel. Whether I want to or not is completely irrelevant, which brings me to willingness. Oh, willingness. This is not in the book. This is America's opinion, okay? But where this whole I'm praying to be willing is, in my opinion, a bunch of horse shit. And let me tell you why. By a show of hands, who was arrested here? Who went to high school? Who's paid taxes? Who did something that they didn't want to do but had to do it anyway? Oh, look at that. Turns out willingness is not a prerequisite to doing stuff. And so it doesn't matter what I want. My head doesn't want me to do this kind of stuff. My head is always yelling at me. Well, not so much now. I have an awful lot of peace now. But, my head tells me that I'm different. It tells me that this isn't going to work. It's contempt prior to investigation. It's all of those things. And it goes back to that definition of humility. The most important part of that definition of humility for me is that part where it's, even if I don't think it's going to work, I'm going to try it anyway. And what my sponsor told me was that, look, if it ends up not working, then come back to me, back to the drawing board. You know what I mean? Like, what's the end of the world? And ultimately, the making of mistakes is such, I don't know if it's just like, I don't know where this comes from. I know we suffer from it, but I know the rest of society does too. But like, where it's not okay to make a mistake. And the bottom line is that the best way we learn is by making mistakes. There really is nothing wrong with making a mistake, but, repeating them because you refuse to learn from them, that's another issue. But when we go, okay, well, that didn't work, and anytime I have an interaction that is less than desirable, it doesn't even have to be bad, just less than desirable, I start going through and like reworking that, going, because my philosophy on that is like, if A plus B equals C, and C is an undesirable result, I am at least A in that equation. At least. And so if I show up differently, I'm going to get a different result. Maybe not the best result, but it's going to be different than C. And that's, do I hear something? I hear something. Okay. All right, then. If it's the voices in my head and you heard them too, well then, nice, we're all screwed. Okay, then. Okay, so the point is that I just have to get out of my own way. That's really the bottom line, is getting out of my own way and taking action. And what I know is that some of the biggest triggers for me for my character defects at this point, and which is really, this is AA 101, which is why they teach you this right when you get here, is the hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Man, when I mean, my big thing is like when I am tired, then hungry, then angry, like in that, and then, lonely. I'm fortunate enough that I don't feel lonely anymore because I come to Alcoholics Anonymous and I reach my hand out. My job is to try to make other people feel welcome here. And when I recently relocated to Los Angeles, so if you're confused why it said El Paso on the thing and they announced me from LA, that's why I moved. And it was in the middle of the pandemic, and we were able to, there was an outdoor meeting. And so I was like, perfect, I'm going to go to this meeting. And I went there, and I started, like always, got there early, because, I was taught that if you're not 15 minutes early to a meeting, you're late, and you have to stay after, because there's the meeting before the meeting, and the meeting after the meeting. And I don't know if the person that I'm going to go introduce myself to, if it's the first time they've ever been to Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know if it's if they're coming back and they were fortunate enough to not die. And so I know that I'm responsible for creating the fellowship I seek. If I sit back with my arms crossed and go, these people aren't coming up to me. God, I can't imagine why, as I'm sitting there looking like a sourpuss. You know what I mean? Like with the don't approach me thing, and then that's my head trying to kill me. And so what I did is that I made it a point to go and introduce myself to everyone. I went to that meeting, and in 15 minutes I said, this is my new home group. And at that point, I was going to learn everybody's name. And so I'd introduce myself, and I would ask them their name, and I said, I'm probably going to have to ask you again, because that was really a big thing where I always forget people's names. God, because why? Because we're so busy thinking about ourselves. But also what happens is that people introduce themselves to me, and then they ask me my name, and then it's like, how'd you get that name? And oh my God, and so like that second where I would be trying to log the name, I do lose some of that in that point. But the point is that if I have to ask you 6 times what your name is, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to let my ego tell me that I should know it by now, because it's my job to make people feel welcome. And there was these couple new guys that showed up at this meeting. And by the way, so like I've lived in LA for 7 months or something now, and like I have a sponsee and a grand sponsee that are here. Hi, you know what? That's reaching my hand out. That's what that is. And I can also tell you that in terms of the importance of sponsorship, as sure as I am standing here, if I didn't have at least one person a week that I was not taking through the book, there's not a chance I'd still be sober. With the exception of a couple of times that I got gravely ill in sobriety, I've been taking people through the book at least one a week. And the way I do it is I meet with my sponsees for 2 hours. We have same bat time, same bat channel. We talk for an hour, we read for an hour. And I have 4 women that I'm doing that with right now. And it's the biggest gift that I have in my entire existence. When we get to see things start to make sense and people get to let go of the things that no longer serve them, and I have seen, and it brings tears to my eyes every time, I have seen sponsees in front of me have a spiritual experience where these lies that their head have been telling them all along, just gone. Oh my God, I can't believe that just happened. That is like the hugest thing in the world. And if you're worried about screwing up being a sponsor, sit down and read. That's it. If you don't know an answer to a question, that's a great question. Let's go ask my sponsor or somebody else. That's it. It's not rocket science. Here's what I know is that if somebody has an honest desire to stop drinking, they can be 12-step by a chimp. Seriously. Wild horses cannot drag them out of Alcoholics Anonymous. We can't screw this up. And, ultimately, steps 8 and 9, we have to seek counsel on that, because my head is either going to tell me one of two things. I don't need to make amends for that. Yeah, you do. Or, I have to make amends for that. And it's like, no, you don't. Shut your face. You go sit down over there. None of that. You old enough to, do the crime, now do the time. Sit with that, you know what I mean? And work on your self-forgiveness and get right with God. And ultimately, steps 10, 11, and 12 allow us to deal with that restless irritability and discontentment from day-to-day existence. It allows us to be current. Now, I've worked the steps many times, and that's because I've bottomed out with other things in recovery. Like for me, who's blessed to be multiple addicted, my prayers consist of, God, please be there when I have no mental defense against the first drink, drug, cigarette, food, and fornication. And because I had issues with all of those things, and I had to work the steps on those things, because I was seeking outside of myself, because I have this hole in my gut and I didn't know it. And the 12 steps work on everything, just in case you're wondering. The book tells us, or the 12 and 12 tells us, that there are certain things that won't yield to our headlong assault. And that's when we have to bring God in. So if I'm sitting here and I'm trying to overcome something, and it's not yielding, guess what? I get to turn it over to God. And then you know what? It works out way better, because the issue for me is trying to manage it. It's the managing of things and trying to manage the outcome of things, which really is the serenity wrecker for me. Once I get involved in the results, all I have to do is footwork. That's it. And let me tell you what that looks like. So without missing this one thing, I want to say before, because I'm watching the clock, because, these are important things. The one thing is, let me get right here. Hold, please. Oh, come on. I am in California, right? So we have the mask mandate all the time. So when you're in the grocery store and you're wearing a mask and you can't get the baggie open and you can't lick your fingers anymore, if you go over to the produce thing and you stick your fingers in, it's still wet there because they watered the plants, whatever, that works. So just as a side note, you learn a lot in Alcoholics Anonymous, it turns out, okay? All right then. So my favorite story in this book is Jim, the car salesman. So he had a business. He owned this dealership, and then he lost it because of drinking. And this is what happened, okay? So he drank and then came into contact with us. And then he's like, no. I got this handled. I got this, right? Whatever. God, yeah, good luck. But, so he was told we told him what we knew of alcoholism and the answers we had found. He made a beginning, his family was reassembled, and he began to work as a salesman for the business he had lost through drinking. Here's the really important part. All went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. To his consternation, he found himself drunk 6 times in rapid succession. So when I read that, I was like, well, obviously we need to figure out how to perfect and enlarge our spiritual life. Well, I'm so glad you asked, because there's actually information on that. So in Bill's story, it said, my friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Particularly was it imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. Faith without works was dead, he said, and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life, here's the key part, through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again, and if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. And so, if we have a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition, And the way we perfect and enlarge our spiritual life is through work and self-sacrifice for others. It tells us, like, when all else fails, work with another alcoholic saves the day. Here's the thing. I hear people say, oh, I was of service to my family, and I've been doing this, and, volunteer work. It doesn't say when all else fails, work at the soup kitchen, volunteer at the animal shelter, help your dad with his taxes. It says work with another alcoholic saves the day. So service is what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. Helping our family is a living amends, and anything else that's in any kind of volunteer work is exactly that. It's volunteer work. It's really important that we don't lose focus of that, because I've seen people do all this service work, and it's not service work. I've also seen people get so busy in Alcoholics Anonymous, doing so much service and doing so little self-care, that they create so much restless irritability and discontentment that they get loaded. That's why it's an equilateral triangle. That's why it's don't get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. It doesn't mean that I haven't, had to stay up late and be, kind of trash for the next day at work or whatever, but I don't make it a regular practice. Because I'm not at my best. I don't feel good. I'm also not I'm not the best employee that I could be. And that, trying to be the best employee that I can be, not the best that I can be on that day, is practical application of humility. Putting the grocery cart away is that. And, I was talking with a sponsee, and she wasn't feeling very connected spiritually. And this is when she and I had first started working together. And she had said that she had talked to this gal, and she gave her this whole meditation practice, right? Because the 11th step, right? And that's great. We want to improve our conscious contact with a higher power, right? Well, as someone who also works other programs, I can tell you that in a sister program, I've lost 140 pounds. And what I can tell you, anyone who's ever struggled with their weight, here's what I can tell you. You will know for sure that it's 90% diet and it's 10% exercise. The reason that is important is because the way that I'm not looking to just improve my relationship with my higher power, my conscious contact. I'm looking to perfect and enlarge it. And so what that means for me is that 90% of my spiritual time, 90% of that is devoted to service, and 10% is to meditation. And I got to tell you, when that finally came together for me, it was the difference between being depressed and feeling useless to having a purpose in this world. And I never had a purpose. When you get sober, it's what does God want from me? What am I supposed to do? What we're supposed to do is carry the message. We're supposed to help people. We are beyond human aid, but God does gift us with the ability to channel things and help them. And so in doing so, I get to perfect and enlarge my spiritual life. And I get to stay here, ergo, I have a daily reprieve contingent on my spiritual condition, right? And so now let me just tell you, because I have 10-ish minutes left, I'm going to tell you about some things that I've grown up in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And so just because I get sober, if you notice, the thing that I had emphasized when I read in Bill's story was there were certain trials and low spots ahead. It means life's in session. I have had a whole host of health issues in my life. Growing up, I'm blind in one eye, not exactly who you want me on your softball team, just, saying. And, I had chronic pain for 20 years. And when I was 23 years old, it was bad enough that I had a doctor offer me a pump of morphine. And I was like, probably not conducive to long-term sobriety. You know what I mean? And so it'd be one thing, to have surgery, which I've had a ton of surgery too, that it's one thing to do that, but for me, the idea of having to do something that drastic just seemed really unsafe for my sobriety. And so I made a decision at that time, which was, I guess I'm just going to have to be a bitch, because if you've ever had a lot of pain, you're really just short-tempered. And I really was for like 20 years. And that's what I did. And my pain just continued to get worse and worse. And I fortunately came in contact with a doctor that like changed everything for me. I don't have time to get into it, but it was life-altering. And then I was healthy for a little bit, and then one day I woke up and 70% of my feeling in my below my knees was gone. It was numb, and I ended up being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, MS, and that is I take very good physical care of myself. Very good physical care of myself, because it makes a real big difference in how I do. Sometimes I have to be on a cane. I've been on a walker before. It turns out people are really polite. They offer you your seat, hold the door for you. It's awesome. And when I was diagnosed, it's funny because I had no memory of this. It's funny. I had no memory of this at all until a gal came up to me like a year later. And it was during that time frame that I was waiting for my diagnosis, and they thought it was probably MS, but we needed to make sure. And so I was upset, obviously. I went to a meeting and I, shared, anybody got a burning desire? That would be me. So this is what's going on. I was on a cane, whatever. And I was living in Los Angeles at the time. And if you've ever been to LA, it's like hot woman central. I mean, seriously. And I was like, trying to be the hottest 35-year-old in Los Angeles is really a tall order, but perhaps being the hottest 35-year-old with a cane is a demographic I might win. And I said that when I shared, and I had no memory of it until this gal comes and tells me a year later. She goes, "You said the greatest thing." I'm like, "What did I say?" And so now I'm telling you because I thought it was funny too. And so, but that is like through redirecting my thinking all the time. It doesn't have to be a calamity. Like whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And then 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And somebody said to me in the program, "God, you've had so much stuff go on. Why you?" And my response was, "Why not me? It says there's certain trials and low spots ahead. So, maybe I'm like exceptionally good at dealing with shit like this." And so let me tell you, so I had, 25 years sober at the time? And so let me tell you the mental process that I went through. It will take me longer to actually say the words than the thoughts that fired through my head, because you know how they're like nano thoughts? So first thought, I get the diagnosis and I think, maybe this will be it. I can finally check out of this little world, and I don't have to go on. And then the very next thought was, "Who are you kidding? You're going to have to persist forever." And then the very next thought I had was, if I'm supposed to die of cancer, I will, and if I'm not, I won't. If I am not supposed to die of cancer, there's not a single thing that I'm going to do that won't work. But if I am supposed to die of cancer, anything that I went to do to try to handle that cancer won't work, and I'll die. And the only thing that was concerning to me was that we had already buried my sister at that point, and there's just the two of us. And I thought, God, that would be rough for my folks to have to bury their other kid. And then I thought, my parents are resilient people. If God's got a perfect plan for me, He's got a perfect plan for them too. They're strong people. They'll figure it out. And that's my job, is to have unconditional trust that God is always looking out for my highest good. That even on my worst day, God is proud of me. Even on my worst day, I can never let God down. I had a profound spiritual experience when I had 3 years sober, and I was sobbing. in the fetal position. Well, I was just about to turn into the fetal position. And as I turned over, I actually felt like someone was behind me and holding me. And I even looked, and it was no one. And those words were uttered to me. In the entirety, it said, "America, I will never give you more than you can handle. You are safe and protected. Even on your worst day, I am proud of you. Even on your worst day, you can never let me down. You are already the woman that I know you to be, and I'm waiting for you to see it." And I just cried. And for the first time in my life, I learned the difference between having my feelings with God than having my feelings with the disease. And if you're not sure what the difference is, if you are really upset about something and these thoughts go through your head, this is too much for you, you can't handle this, I assure you that is the disease talking to you. Because if you're lacking faith in the idea that God won't give you more than you can handle, borrow mine, because I assure you my faith is so deep it would cover the world. That's how deep my faith is. When I got here, I had no relationship with God, and now today it is the single most important relationship I have. God taught me that all I had to do was be proud of me and have God be proud of me. That's all I ever needed in this whole world. All those years that I tried to get my dad to approve of me, who is spiritually sick. How can he possibly meet my needs? And where the character defect comes for that was why would I continue to go to an empty well and then wonder why I am thirsty? He doesn't have it in his wheelhouse to do it. I have to love him where he's at. I expect him to love me where I'm at. See how that goes? And, it is, I can't believe the life that I have. And I guess the last story I'll share with you is when my sister died. And if ever there was a doubt that God will do for you what you cannot do for yourself, this is how I definitively proved it to me. My father is a narcissist, and that's not his fault. So he doesn't know how to demonstrate. And when I came home, there was a big blackout in San Diego that day. And when I came back, my parents were just totally squirrely and weird, and they sat me down and they said, "Look," and then they told me that my sister died and that she had shot herself and she left her 5 kids behind. That's alcoholism. And then my dad said, "Oh my God, my baby's gone," and he started to cry. And in that moment I knew that I said, "Oh my God, he really does love us." And then I said the following, God said the following that came out of my face. I said, "You guys, this is going to be one of those things. It's either going to blow our family apart or it's going to bring us closer together, and that's a decision we have to make right now, what we want in our family." And my parents were lost kids. They're "We want it to bring us closer together. How do we do that?" And I said, "If you need to cry, you cry. If you need a hug, you come get it. If we think you need a hug, you're getting it." And the only thing that I could do was get up every morning and take a walk, literally putting one foot in front of the other. And I didn't know what else to do. Most days, both my parents were with me, and then sometimes it was either or, but I went every day. And We would tell stories. Sometimes we'd laugh. Sometimes we'd cry. I decided to start making dinners for my parents every day until I don't know when. And the thought that went through my head after I told my parents what we were going to do was, I have one job in combating the disease, and that is to find gratitude. Gratitude is the kryptonite to the disease. And the thought came to me was, she will never drive drunk with her kids in the car again, and she doesn't have to live that alcoholic hell anymore. And if the trade-off is that I don't ever get to see her again, I'm grateful. And through you and these steps and just taking action, contrary action, whether I wanted to or not, you guys, I have to tell you, my first 2 years sober was harder than walking through that with my sister, because I had no skills then. And I went to grief counseling because I've never dealt with something like that before. Shit, I couldn't deal with the stubbed toe when I got sober, let alone something like this. Thought I'd get some instruction. And the guy cut me loose after 3 sessions. He said, your head is already where I try to get all of my patients. He goes, it's futile for you to keep coming back here. He goes, just keep doing what you're doing. And you guys taught me how to show up for my life. You taught me how to find the silver lining. That's my only job, because with gratitude, I have a chance. I want to thank you guys again. I want to thank Bob and Marnie. Karen, thank you. In case no one told you today, you're fabulous, and you're loved, and you're beautiful. And that I hope that one day you'll be able to see what God sees in you, because I can see it standing here. Thank you.